محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العسام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبت وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكروك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوب غافرا ولا لقبائح ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلايا قنته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثمينك وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترز فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وفاقي يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة وعلى قلوب اعترفت وعلى الألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما هكذا الذل منك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكفو يسير بقاء قصير مدة فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل الوقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأفجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الذن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحدين وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك كنت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهبني في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنت، أخفيته أو أظهرت، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتمين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزل أو إحسان تفضل أو بر تنشر أو رزق تبسط أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستر. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب everyone يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا الله يا ربي يا ربي رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، وعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقل عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة، فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي، يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء، يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وعجل فرجه.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، وصلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب الأسر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد. I know my voice may be dying, but inshallah your voices are recovering a bit more than mine. So inshallah, in honor of the salawat of Ali Muhammad, we can offer a little bit more. أفلح من صلى على محمد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has yet again given us the tawfiq to journey through the usul that He has prescribed for us in order to help us reach perfection in our life. Just as a quick reflection, this is session 11. We've had maybe 3-4 breaks within that time. So 15 weeks. 52 weeks in a year. It's almost a third of the year that we've spent together. Call it a quarter if you like, if you want to be a bit more fair. Just imagine where that time has gone already. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, the very famous surah, Surah Al-Asr, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wal-Asr, He swears by this concept of time. And He promised us, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ, that verily man is at loss. When it comes to time, we are running out second by second. We never know what incident happens to us today, tomorrow, last week. That could have been our last incident to face. So alhamdulillah, with this time that we've been given, inshallah we can continue to invest in it and ask Allah to multiply this investment that we want to put away our Thursday evenings, and may Allah reward you for it so that we can get closer to Him. And inshallah we now continue to the third of our usul. But we started with Tawheed, and we recognize that this was the foundation of the foundation of the foundation. And you'll even realize in this usul, we'll still go back to Tawheed. We then went to the Adalah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we understood His divine justice. We understood whether there is a concept of free will or predestination, or the middle ground, as we then sought to clarify. And now we've finished our introduction of the introductions of these two critical usul. We now come to the next three, and we start with the concept of nubuwwah, the concept of prophethood, a concept that we share in at least semantics with those of the Christian faith and the Jewish faith as well. It's a point that we unite on. It's a point that we discuss Abraham, Jesus, Isaac, Noah, etc., etc. And there is a question that is given to any of these faiths. And to be honest, maybe I would say any faith generally that has divine leaders appointed to it. And we certainly in the Muslim faith receive this set of challenges as well about prophethood. Questions like, is it necessary for prophets to actually be sent to guide us? Is it necessary? Well, obviously assuming that they exist for the moment, but the question that usually comes with the challenge is it necessary? Was there any point behind it? Because, and especially in today's day and age where this society is currently believing more and more by the day that we're the smartest of the smartest of the smartest, that we know everything. And we're like, aren't our intellects good enough to decipher and understand every single reality in front of us? Because, look at us, look at all this science that we've had over all these years. Surely we're good enough. I'm educated, etc., etc. Isn't the progress of science in itself enough for us to decipher? Like, we don't need any more, thank you very much. Over 2,000 years at least of modern history, we're good. We've progressed so much, we can send rockets to space. Even the founders of e-commerce companies and electrical car companies can send rockets to space. Like, what's the big deal? And this question is coming around, and we're struggling to have a good answer to it. Because we're like, oh yeah, prophets are useful. We're smart, but prophets are useful. It's like, okay, well, how are they useful? Prove it to me. Logically, prove it to me. How are they useful? Please clarify it. Because otherwise, respectfully, if I can follow, and this is unfortunately what we see today, if I can follow a modern philosopher who understands my time, I'd rather go with his or her works than I would with a prophet who lived thousands of years ago who never saw my time. And they start following individuals who have been handpicked by man rather than picked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah, through today's session, we'll realize just how much of a shortcoming this is upon those who are now taking their divine guides to be average laymen who just happen to be a great inventor because Allah gave them the rizq in the first place. Perhaps they'll come forward and say, look, whatever the prophets tell us is either one of two things. Either it's something that our intellect understands already. They're average guys, they tell us something, we already get it. So then the question would be, well, we don't need the prophets then, right? So get them out of the way. Or on the other hand, they tell us something that our intellect doesn't understand. Well, in that case, if our intellect doesn't understand something, then we shouldn't be taking it anyway. Because anything that's been proven to, anything that is true in our life needs to be proven to us. through our senses, through our aql, through our revelation. And another question that they then come forward and ask, and this in particular, and I ask you for your deepest attention, because inshallah we'll perhaps relate this to a future lecture together on the topic of marja'iyya, where you hear people now coming forward and saying, well, hold on, is it correct for a human to be placed completely in the hands of another human? Have you heard this argument coming up against marja'iyya? It's come into some communities, I'm not sure whether it's come here, but I know some of the Pakistani communities and Khawarij communities in Birmingham and Stanmore, at least I know this conversation has come up. We've got our intellect. Again, it shows the arrogance of how we've come today. We've got this intellect. We know. We're smart. We've studied. We've been brought up here, etc., etc. Why should I have to listen to so-and-so who's 90, 100 years old, living in Najaf, living in Qom, who doesn't even speak my language, they think. Doesn't even speak my language to make rules for me. He's never had to shake hands with the opposite gender. He's never had to use a toilet where there's not a nice little hose on the side and you've got to take a bottle of water in and whatever. He doesn't live my life. Why do I need to listen to him? Why should I need to put my future, my life in the hands of another human being? The only person I need to do that is in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the basic, and it's incredible how poor this logic is, but this is the basic argument that these individuals bring forward. And unfortunately, many of our elders and youth are now saying, yeah, we don't need the marja'iyya, we'll make our own rules. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahu Akbar. Honestly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given these individuals such wisdom, and they use it in this way. So they'll say, for example, aren't the prophets just like humans like we are? Why do we need to agree to be subservient to them? Just like another human, I'm only subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how do I respond? When someone piles all these allegations, all these questions against prophethood against me, or the concept of a divine leader, genuinely, how do I respond? Because, and we'll just understand the impact before we start our analysis, if we don't manage to fend this off, we end up with a faith of tawheed on our understanding, which is limited. See how dangerous that becomes? We end up in a faith on our interpretation, because we don't feel we need any other guides. And if you look at it crassly, you take an ayah of Quran and you give it to one group and they'll see love. You give that same ayah to another group and they'll establish Daesh and they'll behead anyone that walks in front of them. That is the difference between people who have taken it upon themselves to try and interpret a book and those who have truly understood the message of the Anbiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our dear prophets. May Allah bless them all, and in honor of our dear Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, in honor of him, inshallah, we'll begin our journey. So how do we respond? There's a few key arguments that we're going to cover, and these are all logical premises. We won't be using Quran just yet, so these are all just logical. As I'm sure you can imagine in Quran, how many times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we send down guides, we send down messengers, etc., etc. So that's the easy way to kind of say, oh look, Allah said it. But we want to start just logically to see if our brain can engage with these arguments. So how do we respond to all these allegations? The first point that we need to recognize, and that we've alluded to already, is that our knowledge is limited. We've mentioned this in Tawheed already. There's only one entity who has unlimited knowledge. We've established that, we've proven that. But for us, our knowledge is limited. Despite science's progression, no scientist would say today that they know everything. And no scientist who is aware of how big the universe could be would be able to perform a calculation that illustrates that we know X percent, that is maybe beyond 10%, right? Even at that, they would probably feel nervous genuinely writing that down and getting that paper published. The realms, the judgments, the comprehension of our intellect, they're all just a tiny fraction of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created and given to us. Put it this way, what we know is like the tiniest spotlight. Literally, a tiny torch. Imagine when the lights were for Dua-E-Kumayl, just one tiny torch from this camera or from my phone. That's it. That was the only torch amongst this huge room of darkness. The prophets are like the sun. And you wouldn't say, I've got a spotlight, so I don't need the sun. It would be ignorant of any rational person to come out with that kind of judgment. In a similar way, a child doesn't learn ABC in preschool or whenever it is that it happens, Alif Bata in the Arabic side, whatever. And then they're like, that's it, I'm done, I'm finished, that's all I need to know. I've learnt this specific part, I've got this tiny little bit of this torch, I'm good, that's all I need to know. Because at that time, they're suffering from compounded ignorance. If you let them do that, they don't know what they don't know. They may think that they're like rock stars knowing ABC. I may think I'm a rock star because I've read one book in my life and I can come and share it with you. But it's compounded ignorance. I don't know what I don't know. I don't see anything else. I don't understand anything else. So if a man comes to you and says, yeah, I know everything, there's a chance their torch is so limited and they haven't seen everything else that's behind them. So no human with a degree of knowledge would ever say, yes, I know everything. Of course, if they're not connected to the divine, all divine, wise. The second point, so the first point, limited knowledge. The second point, and this is against or to counter that point specifically with regards to why should I put myself in the hands of an individual rather than just my Lord? Nobody said that a human is placing themselves completely at the disposal of one another. No one ever said that when we spoke about divine, note the word, guides. Not divine owners, divine guides. They have come to guide you. Hadi, hidayah, these kind of words. Yahdun. The point is that the prophets are related to divine revelation. That divine revelation, that divinity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know it is endless knowledge. It's unlimited knowledge. And we must, by means of certain and sure reasons and understanding, know their relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the clear difference here. If I were to say, yes, I'm a prophet, you'd be like, dude, you're an average bloke. Like, give it up, right? You're just an average bloke. There's a distinct difference between myself and a prophet. One is connected to the divine, and he is passing the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to creation. He is connected to the infinite knowledge. You're not bowing to him. You're bowing to the one that he is guiding you towards. Even in Imamah, we hear them known as Da'i Allah, as callers unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bi'idhnillah, they can do ABC. Bi'idhnillah, they can govern this world and they can perform miracles. Bi'idhnillah, it's always bi'idhnillah. It is only then that the words of these heavenly messengers can be accepted, because we know it's connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore we accept their reckoned teachings with all of our hearts and our being. And let's try and again use a very simple example. If you have an incident, let's say you've got an infection, and you go to the doctor, you're like, oh, I feel I've got fever, whatever, and you say, yeah, I think you've got an infection. He's going to give you some antibiotics. You take those antibiotics. Does that mean you're submitting to this guy? No. If someone says to you, oh, you've taken his advice, that's it, you're submitting to him. It's like, no, honestly, I just took his advice. I, as a rational, intellectual individual, used this brain, went to an expert who had studied and who is closer to the science, and sought out his or her opinion, and they suggested I do this, and I had the free will, as we said last time, to either take it or leave it. But I thought, in my own understanding, this looks decent, it makes sense logically, with my wisdom, I'm going to listen to the best of it, as we mentioned a few weeks ago, and therefore I'm going to act on it. That's not me submitting to him, I'm not kissing his feet now. I'm not obeying his every order. I'm just following the expert. In the same way that these are doctors of our bodies, the Anbiya are doctors of our souls, of our future. And whilst these individuals went to study at UCL and at King's and at Birmingham and all these other amazing medical schools we have in the UK and across the West and the East, the Anbiya, I guess you could say, have studied. I don't know, I don't really know what the right way to put that is. But they're connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have graduated from the university of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this knowledge, and they're constantly being taught. They're constantly learning. More importantly, we must also then study the reason for the necessity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even sending prophets in the first place. So we've established firstly that, look, we've got this limited knowledge, right? And with this limited knowledge, we then recognize that actually we only know what we know. We don't know anything else around us. And therefore, it makes sense for any rational, logical human being to go to others, to seek more knowledge, because we only know what we know. And on the second hand, we're saying we're not completely submitting, we're just seeking the advice. We're going to those who know better than us in certain fields. And when it comes to how to live the perfect life, we believe that the prophets could be those individuals, could be. But this is where this third point comes in. We need to go and study the reason and the necessity of Allah wanting to send these prophets to us in the first place. We need to prove that they are actually well equipped, that they went to this university of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they've graduated, that they're stamped, that they're authoritative over us. They're not just random individuals that have been chosen by man. And there's three main reasons for why we require the guidance of the holy prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah we'll cover all three today if we have the time. The first is the need of their teachings. We as humans have a need for their teachings. Within us we have a need for it. Secondly, we have a need for the leadership that they share and illustrate in social settings and moral settings. And thirdly, we have a need for having prophets who can present the law to us, the law of the land, the law of the humans. And we're going to illustrate how necessary these three things are, and then recognize this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent them, and it's for this reason that whatever they say, I know is the command of Allah, and therefore I follow it. And I absolutely require them for any individual in humanity to be able to reach their goal in perfection. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. So we start with the first point, which is the need of their teachings. Can we prove that we really need the teachings of the Anbiya? I'm going to paint a very weird concept. Well, Ayatollah Nasser puts this in his books. It's like a weird, wonderful one, but I'm going to share it with you. If you were to get on some like fairy tale horse, Disney time, right? Not that I'm an advocate, but anyway, you're on a Disney horse, whatever it looks like. It's built of rays of light, and in every second you're traveling 300,000 miles. So you're flying faster than that, approximately 60 times faster than that. If it's going at 500 miles per hour, it's probably slowing down right now. In this space that has no end, without doubt, you'll need to have thousands of lifetimes of the life of Nabi Nuh alayhi salam just to even see a tiny part of this extensive universe. It's so big, and we don't even know how big. So it's clear, and we've established this again in one of the first sessions where we said, did Allah create things aimlessly, or was there reason behind everything that's created? We recognize that Allah doesn't create all of this for his own sake, because Allah is free of need. He doesn't need to stroke his ego. He has no ego. He does it out of divine wisdom for us as his creations to benefit from. And we recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's goal was to give mercy to others and to help creatures, his own creations, reach their perfection. Just like the fact that the sun shines upon us without us having without it having any need from us. It's completely independent of us, if you like. The sun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is completely independent of us. We can pray all we like, it has no value to him. He's not in need of value. So with this, we now look on the other hand. That on the one hand, okay, we see that there's knowledge behind everything and there's so much to try and acquire. On the other hand, we need to ask, is our intelligence, is our knowledge, is our wisdom that we have within us sufficient for us to move along the way of perfection and reaching towards becoming a perfect human being? Do we have every single answer within us? As in, if you were to go to any human being on the face of this planet right now and put them to the side, except our awaited Saviour, and you'd say, okay, sir, madam, your goal is to reach perfection, which maybe they'll dispute in the first place, so they've already lost the first question, right? They're already out. But let's say they say, yes, I know my goal is to reach perfection, is to get as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as possible. Great. Tell me every single secret in the universe that you can leverage in order to do that. No one's going to be able to give you the perfect answer. Factually, no one except bi'idhnillah, our awaited Saviour. So we see that there is a limitation within every single one of us. We don't even have to prove it more than this. That we all or neither an individual, except our way to save bi'ithnillah, understands all of the secrets of the world in order for them to reach perfection. That we all don't know what the truth of life is, that we don't know when the world started, and we'd probably struggle to figure out when the world is going to end. And there's so many different opinions about even the basics of these questions, let alone how do you build a society that works in perfect harmony so everyone can reach perfection. Because one person comes in and argues and says socialism is the way forward. Russia a few years ago had said communism is the way forward. Boris Johnson comes forward and says capitalism and lying is the way forward. Who knows what other ideas he's got, right? Any different country goes and says, I've got the solution, I've got the solution, I've got the solution. And what happens? Time happens. And what does time do to every single civilization that we've seen so far? It illustrates that it's limited. It illustrates that it's got faults. And eventually the people who have been under duress, under stress, under pressure from this government or from this regime or from this society, these guys revolt against it and the next one comes in. The Anglo-Saxons turns up, the Vikings turns up, Saddam turns up, Saddam leaves, the Vikings leave, the Anglo-Saxons. Who's left? Boris comes, he's gone. Even Jeremy Corbyn, who most Shiites thought was an imam one day, he's gone. Who's left? And just on a side point, Sayyid Munir al-Khabbaz in his book on Imam al-Mahdi, he uses this as an illustration to say, how is it when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that there's going to be a day whereby things will be perfect, where everything is great? Can we not believe that there's going to be an ultimate conclusion where there is a perfect society, with a perfect governance, with perfect social structures, with perfect economic structures? How can you deny that? Show me one society that's even been half decent. They've all struggled. In any case, we come back. So you can see that all these scholars even will debate and debate and debate, and you'll do a bachelor's, a master's, a doctorate, 5 more doctorates, and you still won't be able to conclude on what the perfect social, economic, governance structure, legislative structure in the world should look like. You'll struggle. So now what? We started with our first question. You know your goal is to reach perfection. How are you going to do it? You ask all the billions of people that pass through this earth over centuries, over millennia, and they've all got different opinions. So are we saying that this perfect creator has created a system where there's just no answer? Where perfection doesn't exist? Where haqq doesn't exist? And he just frankly, astaghfirullah, enjoys seeing chaos unraveling across the world? Eventually, at some point, a rational, intellectual, measured human being realizes that in order to reach this goal of creation, which is to get as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as possible, to reach perfection, to have this nourishment of us as human beings, we do need a series of teachings which are correct and empty of any error whatsoever. We need it. Because whilst capitalism may be great from the perspective of adding wealth into your economy, usually the distribution of that wealth to those who are unable to create it is very, very limited. And whilst you may say, but socialism sounds great, it's so fair for everyone, we can have a system where everyone has the same access to the same healthcare, etc., 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 someone will come and ask, well, how are you going to fund all of this? Because you do need entrepreneurship, you do need, and then you're back in square one. Everyone eventually realizes there's got to be a better system. There's got to be a perfect system. There's got to be a perfect way to live my life. There has to be. And some humans opt to search for it. Other humans opt to just crack on day to day and they don't go anywhere. Then eventually they'll have that call from within them saying, are you going to wake up now? At what point? So we're all searching deep down for this perfect set of rules, these laws, this way to live our life. And that if we rely upon these teachings, we know that we'll be safe and we'll make it. And that can only be done through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. Only. And how does He disperse that knowledge? Through divine revelation, through His holy prophets. Peace be upon them all. And because of this, God who created us to take this very journey must place this knowledge at our disposal. What value is there to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And again, remember, we said He's not in need of extra value. He doesn't need anything. He's needless. What value is there to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create this creation to know the perfect formula and to then withhold it from the creation to have access to it? What is the value to him? It doesn't make logical sense. So that is the first argument that's put forward, that we have a need for these teachings. We want to understand. We want to get closer to Allah. We realize that in a place of absolute chaos, there must be a perfect system that exists somewhere, and this can only come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He disperses this through the revelation via the Anbiya, peace be upon them all. The second angle with regards to this need for our holy prophets and this revelation is the need for leadership in social and moral areas. The first was the need for teachings, for guidance. The second is the need for leadership in social and moral areas. We know, and we've discussed this a few times, and perhaps in Shahr Ramadan, if we're given the tawfiq, we'll go into it as well, that within our being, within each and every one of us, every single human being on the planet, that in addition to this beautiful knowledge and wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, we know we have other motives within us. The motives that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls in the Quran, hawa nafs. These lowly desires, these carnal desires, that is our challenge. That when they come up, that we battle against them and we let our intellect win above them. For example, this instinct of self-love, that I want to be the most known guy, I want to be the most known person, I want to have all of this. The instinct of ghadab, of anger, kadhim al-ghayb. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear, anger exists, ghayb exists. The difference is kadhim al-ghayb. Can you control it? Can you knock out this faculty, control it, and let your intellect dominate? The instinct of lust, and multiple others that we could go into. And if we don't control this instinct, what happens? It dominates us. It clouds our judgment. We make ill decisions. We make Boris decisions. I feel bad to constantly pick on him, but he's honestly like our Trump in terms of the perfect caricature of just how not to be a good human being, unfortunately, right? You have the opportunity now, I think we mentioned a few weeks ago, 4 times to tell the truth about these parties. Still denies it. More pictures, still denying it. And now the Met Police leader is sacked. It's incredible, right? But you have someone who is always, their personal desire comes before their intellect, every single time. And if we don't control it, it dominates us. And what happens? Even our own knowledge and intellect becomes imprisoned. We don't think anymore. We just feel our way to everything. And we turn into wolves, but even worse than the wolves in the wilderness, because we've got a brain that can manipulate and destroy countries, destroy families. So what does that mean? We recognize, I've got this imbalance. I've got these desires, I've got this shahwa, I've got this ghadab, I've got this jealousy, this hasad. But I've also got this intellect, I've got this aql, and I've got this fitrah, and this innate disposition. How do I reconcile them? Every single time I see a decision, I have one thing pulling me one way and another thing pulling me the other. And Amir al-Mu'mineen has a hadith where he says it's like a war. And you need to see which army you're going to be led by. It's a beautiful way to picture it, and we can see it and feel it. So in these moments, what do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us recognize that we need to learn ethics. We need to learn morality. We need a teacher, we need a model so that we can learn from him according to the principle whereby one narrates something and others just follow because they're like, this is intelligent, this is smart, this is the right way to do things. And that individual that is able to teach that is able to guide it, needs to be a perfectly disciplined human. And let me just paint that picture for you for a second. If I, astaghfirullah, and if I have, then you need to call me out and never let me come back, right? But if I'm coming up here and giving you this guidance from Ayatollah Nasr Makaram al-Shirazi, and then in the background you see me pumping music in my car and eating non-halal food and having a beer at home, you'd be like, listen, you've read something, but you're not quite acting, so why am I going to listen to you? In the same vein, if you see an individual saying, I call you towards controlling your anger, I call you towards ensuring you involve your intellect prior to your shahwa, prior to your hasad, etc., but they themselves are not enacting upon it, you can't trust that individual to be a right guide. So this guide that is going to come and teach you these ethics needs to be someone who they themselves are enacting upon it. It needs to be a virtuous person, an immaculate person. a prophet, a teacher, a guide. It's for this very reason that it is not possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not show His mercy to us and then prevent us from the existence of such leaders and teachers. That He illustrates, look at my magnificence and what you feel within you to come and reach me. That when you give to charity without anyone knowing, you feel this amazing thing within you that you can't describe, right? That you've done something so godly. That He's not going to help you reach that feeling more regularly. So He sends you a guide to help you realize this perfection and to build on that perfection. And that guide in and for themselves, the qualities that they must have, and we'll discuss this in Nubuwwah and Imamah as well, needs to be perfect, needs to be pure, needs to be free from mistake. Otherwise, you can't trust them in that guidance. That is their job. The third angle behind this need of having prophets is a prophet who presents the law to us. And you'll see some similarities with what we've just said. Because humans benefit massively from social interactions. If you think about it, right? If you were to analyze how did Elon Musk and how did Jeff Bezos manage to build these rockets and these spaceships that let normal human beings, non-trained astronauts in their even 70s and 80s, one of them was, right? Go into space for a few minutes, have a little float, and then come back down for a good few million. But in any case, that's their decision, not ours. Maybe. We probably contributed it with our Prime memberships, but anyway, we won't go into that. So, humans, in order to get there, have needed social constructs over the last hundreds and thousands of years, from the original scientists from back in the day to recognize, yes, there is a space beyond this blue sky that we see, to then recognizing how do you create energy and force, to then understand how do you put rockets together. And our dear brother was going to tell us how to build rockets and stuff, inshallah, when he graduates one day. All of these years of study culminates together to these guys managing to finish off this last bit of the mission. So we see the human creation benefits from these social constructs over all these years, and it can bring about such amazing results. But on the other hand, if you don't have this togetherness, if you don't have this cohesion, if you don't have this way of living, this way of working, this fair system that many of us are striving towards, but unfortunately doesn't exist yet, you end up in what we see, what could happen just now in Russia and Ukraine, and maybe the next world war. Aggression and warfare, all the time. Oh, we'll learn from World War I. Or we'll learn from the Gulf War. Or we'll learn from the Cold War. Or we'll learn from World War II. Or we'll learn from this war. We'll learn from the war in Iraq. We'll learn from the war of Afghanistan. Or now we're going to crack on with Ukraine and Russia next. And we're ready to defend. And it's just like, are we ever going to learn from this? So as we discussed in Adala, we're mentioning it here again, law amongst social constructs is necessary. It's absolutely necessary for us to be able to move forward. So in order to do that, we need to define our duties in relation to society so that talent can blossom. We need to coordinate methods together so we know whose responsibility in a given society. And this helps with the prevention of aggression, of usurping rights, and even imposing punishments if necessary. So the question is, therefore, okay, fine, we recognize we need laws. Who is the best lawgiver? Remember, we're trying to connect this to Nubuwwah, proving Nubuwwah, the necessity of having divine guides. Guides inspired and taught directly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are giving the revelation of Allah. So who's the best lawgiver? If we recognize that humans need it in order to progress, and we've seen when it's kind of worked, but if we want to progress even further, we need to have a perfect system, who is the best lawgiver? Of course, the answer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but let's try and prove it a little bit. If you look at building a railway, you need someone who has mastered the concept of engineering, right? Someone who can appreciate a bit of physics, momentum, turns, angles, how is it going to go through different terrains, how is it going to handle different weather, when it's above ground, when it's underground. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Crossrail. Ilahi Ameen. Inshallah, Elizabeth line comes soon. So the speed, many years of usage, thousands of people coming off and on, all of this weight, the friction, the heat from the wheels. You need someone who's mastered all of this so that they can build these laws by which the train is going to abide by. No more than 27 miles per hour on this kind of turn. No more than this load in this kind of carriage. This many carriages is the max you can have, and I'm sure there's many more different laws that you have. You need someone who has mastered to perfection, almost, the concept of engineering. And not just one, look how many people it took. And it's still not there. Inshallah, we'll get there soon, so we can all get to Bond Street in 18 minutes, inshallah, from Southwood. We'll get there, right? So similarly, when it comes to the laws that are going to create this perfect social construct in our life, you need someone or something that understands and knows the human species in the most perfect and total way. And for that being or thing or person to be aware of all of the human's instincts, feelings, needs, and difficulties, so you can make the best out of it. So you can take that very tough optimization equation and find the solution and find the parameters. You need something or someone with all of the praiseworthy qualities and talents which exist in a human being and should be taken into consideration, and laws should be made so that they can blossom. And that the events and accidents which are possible to occur should be foreseen so that they can plan meticulously and say, do this, but don't do that. Do this, but don't do that. Don't do that, because then this will happen. They can figure out all of this. Such a lawgiver as well should have no particular interest in any specific society, so that in providing the laws that their thoughts turn into own vested interests. And again, look at what we said about capitalism. It's great in some regard, but usually it punishes those who aren't as high earning. So again, it's not the perfect system. The lawgiver also must allow human beings the possibility to benefit from all of the advancements, as well as to learn from their deviations. How do you find a solution to that? The lawgiver must at the maximum be free from error, mistakes, and forgetfulness themselves, because it needs to be the perfect construct. And finally, this lawgiver must have such power that no position or power in society will ever intimidate him, because they shouldn't be influenced by a group. They should know the truth, and the truth should always remain to be the truth. They should never be lobbied, and they fear no one. And at the same time, he has to be so beautifully kind and merciful, loving and forgiving. Cool. So find me that person. In all of the billions that have come, find me that person. Is it even possible for that person to be a person? For all of those challenges and prerequisites in order to create the perfect construct of a social law for us to thrive as a society, could there even be a human being? Is a human being free from all of these concepts of their own vested interest? Truly. Has anyone understood the human being in such a complete way to date? Has any human being understood all of the instincts, the inner spirits, and the feelings within a human being? And of any of these humans that have lived, are they completely free from any bias? Free from any personal vested interest that if I make this decision, it's going to sort me out that way? Thus, other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those who received his divine revelation, there can never be a perfect lawgiver. The perfect law, the perfect guidance comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, the very creator of the creations. In order to disperse this law into the land, so that the social construct of this world can reach its potential, he sends messengers and guides to say, live this way, don't live that way. Drink this, don't drink that. Wear this, don't wear that. Eat this, don't eat that. When this happens within you, choose that feeling over that feeling. When this person comes to you, send them their way, but guide this person. You know, if you present to ourselves, adults and youngsters, the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala this way, how much more attractive is it? Then you mustn't do this and you must do that or you'll go to hell. Illustrate to them that if you want to reach your perfection, there's a perfect book, there's a perfect set of guidelines waiting to take you there. In this way, we conclude that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created the human being to reach perfection, must therefore send guides to place the laws of heaven at the disposal of the human being. It necessitates nubuwwah. It necessitates it. And it's clear that at the time when people know that those are the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will then put them into practice with more credibility and certainty than if they were a king or a queen or an average person. The awareness that this has come from a creator through divine guides has value, rather than it just being made up. And we'll end with this, and that is that how can we then link back this relationship between Tawheed and Nubuwwah? As we said at the beginning, we've spent 5 sessions on Tawheed, we spent 5 sessions on Adala, and now this is our first session on Nubuwwah. And I said we're going to link back to these usul constantly. It's so important to note that following the system of creation, living in the life of creation, using your eyes, using your ears, using your taste, that in itself is a living witness for the existence of the divine prophets and their mission. Very theoretical concept. So just living is a witness, is a proof for the existence of the divine prophets and their mission. How? The reason is this. At just a short glance of this incredible system that we live in, and we spoke a few weeks ago about how this world all obeys laws, how the plant grows in a certain way, if there is sun, if there is heat, if there is water, etc., etc., it grows. It has a certain level of laws around it that helps it flourish. That you and I, if we put in 200 degrees Celsius, we melt, or something like that, right? We're not going to be able to function, for sure. We all follow a set of laws. There are laws that govern and have been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with a short glance of this incredible system of existence, all of this law and order that Allah is creating, it shows us that nothing of the needs of creatures is hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. Everything is benefiting from it. Absolutely everything is benefiting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. For instance, He gives us this eye to see. He's given us these ears to hear. And they're all protected. Is it possible, therefore, that a God who has met the needs of all of creation would then not provide a leader and a guide who is completely pure and trustworthy to also bring forward His revelation so that we can reach our potential? It's like someone has driven you the whole way to your destination, and you have the keys to that destination because they're a visitor. And you're like, nope, you're not having the keys. It wouldn't make sense. You've done all of this for them up until that point. It doesn't make sense to stop there. Allah has done all of this for all of His creation. Why on earth would He want to withhold the journal, the guidance to become perfect? It would be irrational. And we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all wise. And we end with this, and this is from a famous philosopher, Abu Ali Sina, who you may have heard, in his book Shafa'ah. He says this: the needs of the human being for the sending of the prophets, for the survival of the human species, and their moving towards perfection, is greater than their need for their lashes, for their eyebrows, for the arch of their foot. Thus, is it possible for Him to provide those and not these? Let me try and pin this back a little bit. The need for us to have the prophets to guide us, such that we can get to perfection, is greater than, you can argue, for example, for the need for us to walk. Would you agree? If God forbid we lose our limbs, we can still reach perfection, right? The priority is to what? Walk, or to reach perfection? It's to reach perfection. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you limbs so that you can walk, that is a lower priority for you than to reach perfection. So if He's given you the limbs to walk, which is a lower priority, then why would He prevent you from giving you guides to reach perfection? This is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is it possible that Allah, who so met the needs of a human being, would not provide a leader and a guide who is pure and trustworthy to bring about His revelation? Under what logic would this be the case? So just to recap, this is a very important introduction to Nubuwwah, and I hope you start to see the necessity of it, the brilliance of this revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala coming together. We said that people are going to give us these challenges. Why do I need to follow them? My intellect is so clever. I know what I'm doing. I'm fine. I don't need to submit to a human. I just submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they make all these weird disconnects. We firstly recognize that our knowledge is so limited. We only know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. We only have a torchlight, whereas the sun is available. And no one ever said that we're bowing down to these individuals. We're using our brain and ascertaining that they have the perfect guidance, just like a doctor has good guidance, and we're going to follow it. But they are connected to the divine, and therefore we submit to the source of that knowledge, which is the divine. We then also recognize that we wanted to try and understand the necessity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending these prophets to us. And we gave the example that we need teachings, we need guidance day to day, because there's so much for us to discover, and we simply don't have the answers, and therefore having the answers from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through divine messengers would be it would make sense that this would be a vehicle. The second is that we said we needed leadership in social and moral areas, because we know that if you leave humans to just come together with no guidance, I'm going to be jealous of you, you're going to stab me for being jealous, and I'm going to hate you, and it's just not going to be the best environment. And we'll see a few countries today who are currently suffering from this, and societies. And the third side that we said is that we also need a law, a decent legal system, a social contract for us to reach our potential. And this is what the Anbiya, peace be upon them all, come and deliver for us. It is necessary for us as humans to reach our potential, to have this guidance. And finally, we mentioned this really philosophical but beautiful point. And I just want you to take this bit home if you can. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was so merciful to give you limbs to walk, which is a lower priority than you reaching perfection with your soul, then why would He not give you limbs to reach Him? Those limbs, that guidance, is His revelation. That revelation is brought down by the Anbiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah this has been useful for us all to reflect on, and a worthwhile introduction to the concept of Nubuwwah. Of course we'll continue, and you'll see a lot of overlap, I guess, between the concept of Nubuwwah and Imamah. And inshallah Allah will give us the tawfiq to continue. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. Oh, the mic was here all this time. Sorry.
Thank you, Brother Sadiq, for another informative session. Now we'll move on to Dua-E-Kumayl by Ahmed Mirza.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله، السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله، السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله، السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله، السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله، السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا وارث علي الأمير المؤمنين ولي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى، السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور، أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وطاعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرديت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الإسلام الشامخة وأرهام متهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها، ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من داعم الدين وأركان المؤمنين، وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وآلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والهجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسوله أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن بشراء ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. جاءت عليك السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن شهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن مظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرديت به. السلام عليك يا أولياء الله وأحباءه، السلام عليك يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه، السلام عليك يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليك يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا أنصار فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي ولي الزق الناس، السلام عليك يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وتعبت الأرض الذي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. جاءت هذه السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك أيها العبد الصالح مطيع لله ورسوله، وأشهد أنك قد جاهدت ونسحت وصبرت حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله الظالمين لكم من الأولين والآخرين وألحقهم بذلك الجحيم. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا سلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا قاتل البرهان، السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان، السلام عليك إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهوره. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.